thanks for joining us today for our kind of second Impetus webinar, this time on citizen science, mobility and urban planning. Just wanted to give a bit of background. I'm Alex. I'm a researcher based at the Centre for Collective Intelligence Design in an organisation called Nesta, where we think a lot about different methods to strengthen the relationships between communities and institutions to solve societal challenges. Nesta is the UK's social innovation agency. It's a not-profit organisation focused on positive social impact. As I said, the team that we're in, that I'm in, the Centre for Collective Intelligence Design, we create social impact by harnessing the collective intelligence of people and the power of digital technologies. So we're a multidisciplinary team of researchers, product designers, software engineers, data scientists, and program managers. And I just wanted to draw attention to our playbook, which is on the screen. There's a link at the bottom, which is full of kind of tools and tactics and methods to help you design and deliver a collective intelligence project. So just quickly, the agenda for the session today. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction to Impetus that this seminar is part of, and then hear from some of the projects in the Impetus accelerator that were focused on mobility and urban planning. And then we're going to have a session with Rob around Telraam and setting up a Telraam network. And then there's loads of time for questions if you have them. Feel free to put them in the chat as we're kind of talking, and then we'll have an opportunity for more of an exchange after Rob's presented. And
Sorry, Alex, just to let you know, it's not a massive issue, but we can see the tabs and stuff on your screen. It's not 100% full view. It's not a massive issue, but just in case you wanted to play around with it. And it might be one of those things that the more you play around with it, the worse it gets. But yeah, just wanted to let you know. Just in case you had your emails open or something like that.
Thanks, Chris. I don't. I'm gonna continue as is and not risk it. But thanks. So yeah, I just wanted to give a quick overview of citizen science. I am assuming that most people are familiar with citizen science, but in case you are new to it, we see citizen science as engaging kind of volunteers in a range of activities with different levels of participation, from data collection in projects led by trained scientists to co-designing research questions and policy, to science literacy and public engagement. And citizen science data is the kind of outputs from initiatives that can be used in many different ways. So just very briefly, a little bit of background about Impetus. So Impetus is a 4-year innovation program to support and give recognition to citizen science. And it supports citizen science by enabling a kind of wider range of citizen science initiatives to access innovative funding. And we also aim to kind of bring citizen science closest to society and policymakers. And we have a kind of strong focus on enhancing citizen science's contributions to the European Green Deal and to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we have 3 open calls, and we offer 20,000 euros to kickstart 100 citizen science initiatives and 10,000 euros to sustain 25 citizen science initiatives. So we have this accelerator program that provides an integrated program of support and training and mentoring and resources. We also have the European Union Prize for Citizen Science, which is awarded to citizen science initiatives for kind of outstanding achievements. And then we also do a lot of work around kind of shaping EU policy in and with citizen science. So we're currently in the second round of the accelerator, and so we've supported just under 50 projects working on a range of issues from women's health to food waste and sustainability to inclusive mobility. And why are we doing this? So we want to explore how kind of citizen science can better address priority issues linked to the Sustainable Development Goals and the Green Deal, as I just said. We're trying to improve the evidence base for making citizen science related policy. We're trying to strengthen the capacity of the citizen science community to achieve policy impacts. We're trying to consolidate existing impact pathways by, for example, improving the flow of citizen science data into local, national, and international monitoring efforts. And we're also trying to kind of foster dialogue between local decision makers and the citizen science community. So I was just going to focus on some of the projects that we funded in the first round of the accelerator that were looking at topics relevant to kind of mobility and urban planning. So there was quite a few different projects, and I've included a link to find out more from our website. There was a project called Towards Inclusive Mobility that identified, analysed and raised awareness about accessibility gaps in public transport in Telraam in Poland to provide kind of city authorities with data. Another project, Every Walk You Take, co-created and tested an app called UHealth with a diverse range of stakeholders to develop kind of personalized healthy walking routes in Barcelona in Spain. Another project, Accessible Kadıköy, invited citizens to share their experiences of inaccessible pavements and roads in Kadıköy so it's an area of Istanbul in Turkey. And the aim was to help kind of drive improvements to Kadıköy's physical environment. And then another project, Map for Rec, generated insights on the barriers and enablers of outdoor recreation for young refugees in Twente, in the Netherlands. And so, yeah, there's a range of different projects, but then we're also going to hear from two projects, actually both based in London, here in London. So I'm going to hand over to Esther, who's kindly joined us to talk through her project in Islington.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Okay, great. Yeah, hi everyone. As Alex said, I'm Esther. I work in the engagement team in Islington Council, which is a very small but mighty North London borough. Cool, can we go to the first slide, please, Alex? And yeah, I'm going to talk to you a bit about our project, which we ran last year now, it was a real feel-good project, and it was basically an accessibility audit that we did with disabled residents. So you can see on the slides, it was a cross-council project team. So we worked together with colleagues from transport, from planning, from inclusive design, and other teams as well. And we worked with an organisation called Access Able, who had previously worked with Islington Council to deliver some accessibility audits. But what we wanted to do a bit differently is actually involve Islington's disabled residents in the accessibility audit learning and process as well. And we were also really keen to ensure that we worked with lots of different disabled residents throughout the process. And yeah, you can see on the slide, the key aim, fundamental aim, was for disabled residents in Islington to be trained and deliver an accessibility audit, which will then feed into a livable neighbourhoods plan. So a livable neighbourhoods plan is basically it kind of does what it says on the tin. It's a plan for a certain area of Islington, and for developments to be made in the public realm. So it could be a whole range of things, ranging from mini pocket parks to increasing accessibility, renovating pavements, roads, creating kind of seating area, that kind of thing. And so the plan was for this accessibility audit to be of a part of this future livable neighbourhood plan, and to really work with those disabled residents and centre their experience kind of at the centre of that plan. So we ran 3 workshops over the course of 3 days. It was a really brilliant group of residents. In order to pull together these workshops, we thought about a whole range of different things, as you would expect, things like accessibility, inclusivity. We made sure that we worked with lots of different voluntary community sector groups to kind of put forward residents and share the word about these workshops. And the first one was really a learning day, learning about inclusive design, how to run accessibility audits. The second day was actually doing the accessibility audit, and I'll show you some pictures in the route in a sec. And for that, it was really important that we basically had one-to-one kind of staff and resident to support everybody through the accessibility audit process. And then workshop 3 was actually thinking about kind of longevity and, what can different teams in the council do in the future to improve urban planning for disabled residents. And, of course, and you'll see a quote in a bit, if we start with, if we centre disabled residents' experience at the start, it obviously helps loads of different people across Islington. Cool, next slide please, Alex. Yeah, and you can see this is the accessibility audit, really. And we were kind of one-to-one, so that a member of staff could support or could take notes and take pictures. And we did a route. Some people took a slightly different route, so we could cover as much ground as possible. And their notes and comments and recommendations basically was turned into a report, which was taken away by the Livable Neighbourhoods team to build into the next Livable Neighbourhoods plan. Next slide please, Alex. And you can see the route here. It was kind of around Newington Green. There was quite a lot of different types of areas, including like a really busy main road, roundabout, lots of different crossings to manoeuvre, as well as some really residential areas. And I think something that really came out of this report and in the recommendations was an issue around different kind of services talking to each other in order to make the public realm truly accessible. So TfL, Transport for London, not necessarily always being as communicative as possible with Islington Council, and vice versa as well. Next slide, please. And just a few key quotes from the participants, from the residents. The first one on the top left, I think, is the one which I kind of always remember from this project. So when the deaf participants commented on how much they'd learned from visually impaired residents, I thought that is inclusive design. And I think, really having that pan-disability approach, and there being discussion and deliberation between people in the room about recommendations and about what would work. That created firstly a brilliant kind of atmosphere and environment in the workshops, and brilliant relationships between us and residents, but also it actually meant that there were some really good concrete kind of recommendations that the council could take forward. And access makes it better for everyone, not just disabled people. And this other one on the top right is something that has also really stuck with me. The only thing that counts is what I think is accessible, not what Islington Council or TfL, Transport for London, thinks. Accessibility is subjective. And so thinking about how we bring that into future kind of public realm planning has been a key recommendation. And final slide please, Alex. And in terms of like the impact on urban planning, I think I I could do a whole hour on the impact of this project in terms of kind of building relationships and building trust with the council. And but in terms of urban planning, following the workshops, there were kind of immediate improvements that were made. Things like drop curbs changing, potholes being fixed, bicycle hangers being moved slightly so that there's more space for people with mobility issues. You know, a few things like that were done immediately. And now the Livable Neighbourhoods team is basically working on the next Livable Neighbourhoods plan, and they'll be centering, or they are centering, kind of disabled residents' experiences at the heart of this kind of next planning stage. And I think it's also influenced the way that they do the rest of the engagement as well, and trying to, you know, very much actively seek input and experiences from disabled residents, and yeah, putting that kind of front and center. And then, yeah, there's another point around the recommendations that we worked on in that final session with the group, being taken forward to different teams around the council and applied in their own way. And so they gave, a lot of really excellent kind of feedback and recommendations about the ways in which we actually run consultations and engagements. And a lot of it included, things like changing the way that, we run formal consultations to make sure that there are kind of in-person options, and that the consultations are shared with voluntary community sector groups, that people go to places where, people will be anyway, so that people won't have to go out of their way to take part. Things like that. I could give you a whole list. But yeah, that's it from me. If anyone is interested to hear more, or or to hear some kind of learnings, of which there are, of course, plenty, then you're very welcome to get in touch. I can put my email in the chat. Oh yeah, it's on the screen. There you go.
Thanks so much, Esther. That's brilliant. And if anyone has any questions for Esther, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll come back to them a bit later. So next, we're going to hear about another project from the first cohort, which was in Lambeth in South London. I'm actually going to present for them, so I can absolutely field questions. I know a bit about the project, but I might, if there are specifics related to this project, I can pass them on. This project focused on the concept of low traffic neighborhoods, which is an extremely kind of controversial topic, despite kind of a long-standing recognition of their environmental, social, and health benefits. And there's quite a lot of skepticism around who benefits. And there's a kind of more of a tension around the kind of lived experience of people situated on the edges of these neighborhoods, and the traffic data. And so the project aimed to explore how citizen science methods can effectively connect those who are worried about the impact of low traffic neighborhoods with local authorities. And the project invited local residents to participate in a kind of transparent and kind of collaborative traffic monitoring process to communicate and identify concerns and solutions about delivering high quality, low traffic neighborhoods. So the project, as I mentioned, took place in Stockwell in South London. And this was an area where the low traffic neighborhood was yet to be designed. So there was an opportunity to compare kind of general weekday and weekend traffic flows in that area, and to assess the relationship between traffic levels and air and noise pollution impacts, and to collect data with guidance and support from Tranquil City, that's independent kind of grassroots environmental data collective. So at the time of writing, or like when the project was applying to IMPETUS, so in June last year, June 2023, they were looking at kind of other low traffic neighborhood projects, and they weren't aware of any that explored how kind of behavior or attitude change could be delivered by citizen science. So they were kind of very keen to test this idea in a borough that was open to kind of new partnerships and experimentation. And the overall goal of the project was to provide a safe space where the local community could discuss how to improve the low traffic neighborhoods and be kind of supported by collaborative traffic monitoring processes. And so the final output was to demonstrate a clear methodology for implementing better and more inclusive traffic schemes. So this is the project team. And this is the project timeline. So it took place kind of in the second half of last year. And in terms of the kind of impact, some of the feedback from the citizen scientists who took part was that they kind of greatly appreciated similar data collection techniques that they were using that were being explored by the local authority. There were kind of big aspirations to see an extended citizen science project that would feature traffic monitoring on more roads and occur over a longer timescale. Because I guess when this project took place, it was during the kind of summer of 23. So thinking about different times of the year. And also they hoped that a future project would actively engage kind of underrepresented groups in the area. And the citizen scientists really valued the project team sharing and presenting the findings to the council. So they felt like their voices were heard and seriously considered alongside kind of more traditional modes for community consultation. And in terms of the impact for the local authority, for Lambeth, so they are looking forward to kind of articulating a clear methodology for evaluating the design of diverse traffic schemes using citizen science. They also acknowledge the kind of key learnings and takeaways in the final report of the project. And they want to promote how the kind of this traffic flows project can be adopted and appropriately tailored to suit kind of the unique contexts of other areas in Lambeth and elsewhere. And they see the kind of value in this project helping to facilitate kind of more inclusive input into diverse traffic streams and creating healthier environments for everyone. That is a very short overview of the project. But the project was led by Chloe, and so I can put you in touch if you have more questions around that specific project. So I'm now going to hand over to Rob from Telraam. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully Rob can share his.
Right, I'm sorry about that. Once I start sharing, Zoom likes to hide my all the other navigation buttons. So hopefully you can see this. Thanks, Alex. I was actually also helped practically in that Stockwell project. So if you have any questions, I might be able to answer some of them, although Chloe was the one who led it. But I can answer some details about that. But I'll try and explain a little bit more generally about Telraam and how it fitted into this, how we do stuff as a tool for citizen science. Obviously, you're the citizen scientist. You are the ones driving it. We're effectively a way to carry it out. So hopefully by explaining what we do, we can have a good discussion about that. There's lots of ways to gather traffic data, but our unique position at Telraam is that we particularly want to leverage the potential of citizen science to make this different, better, and unique. So I'll give you a very brief outline of what we do just to give you some context. I won't spend too much time on it, but please feel free to ask questions. Essentially, Telraam is a traffic monitoring solution that can be used either for professionals who then engage citizens or by grassroots citizen movements that want to capture information in order to use that data to lobby the people who make the decisions about what happens on their streets. What we want to do is convert all these citizens into participants. And that's all citizens. As the Stockwell project showed, this isn't just about those who support projects who want to do it, but even when it's controversial and you want to involve people who might be maybe feel negatively towards whatever it is you're doing, by participating and using the same data tools and same processes, you can create a dialogue and engagement which actually helps the project and helps to deliver it and helps to create that sort of interaction. So very quickly, how does it work? You've seen this picture a couple of times now. That is the device. It's a standardized tool which has a camera-based system. It identifies up to 10 different modes that are passing on the street. So that's your cars and buses and trucks and so on, which is obviously an essential part of any traffic flow, or what we could traffic in inverted commas. That's what most cities are planning around, which is vehicles, but also the active travel modes, the pedestrians and the bikes, which is the sort of more, shall we say, social use of the streets, which to date has not been as well documented and hasn't necessarily been brought into the plans, which is why residents on the streets want to be asked to participate, because they're trying to take back some level of control. It's as well as capturing the numbers, it'll give you the direction of the travel and give you a speed for the cars. All of those are useful data points. Again, not going to great details, but the idea is that this is a plug-and-play solution so that there's a standardized data gathering solution that data users can rely on, so they don't need to worry about the training or the variability built in by, shall we call, different types of citizen science, which maybe require, let's say, manual counts, for example, like bird counts or subjective impressions of noise or so on. This is a standardized tool for doing that. And it's plug and play so that citizens don't have to do much. We can involve any citizen, whatever their technical knowledge, as long as they have a plug near a window and that window is near a street, they can be involved in this project. So who does it? So we make the device available. It can be bought either by individuals, but ideally this is done by the people who are actually involved in making plans for the street, which tends to be either local authorities or city authorities or even national authorities. But they can't do this alone. They already have data tools, which they are usually very expensive, and they use for monitoring, let's say, busier high streets and highways. But that gives them very little information on actually the majority of streets, which are residential or secondary. And that's why, and that's where most of us live, and that's where most of us have an experience of traffic. And so it's the residents of the streets that overlook them that want to be involved. What we offer is a solution that allows those people interested, whether it's the grassroots or it's the authorities, to recruit volunteers. And we find actually that this is a relatively straightforward process. As long as you can get the word out, people will volunteer. I'm sure you know in your own personal life, if someone were to tell you that you have a chance to join a group to decide changes on the street outside your window, outside your home, you'd probably want to be involved. So there's no need here to pay or to do lots of research. It's just about getting the word out. I've just got an example here. We're doing a project in Caerphilly in Wales, where there is a town planning project going on to make the traffic flows around the town better, to increase active travel, to make it easier for shops. So they have put out a project to get volunteers to help them with that. This can also work in much wider reaching. I'll come on to this a little bit later, but this is a map of the volunteers in the Utrecht province in the Netherlands. I should say Telraam is a Belgian-based company, so most of our actual networks are in Belgium and the Netherlands at the moment, expanding very much into Germany and France, and so the UK is relatively new. But you can see from our map, this is a mapping of the locations of the volunteers, the candidates we call them, across the province, who are given the opportunity to sign up. So you can see it can be very wide-ranging. And the next to it is a small map of the very hyper-local recruitment candidates for that Stockwell project. You can see right down to the street and street corner level where these people are based, and therefore choose the locations that are relevant. So the method for getting these candidates into your project will vary depending on the scope of your project. There are projects which are regional, which are very wide. Let's say you want to look at, I'm doing a project, for example, in Cambridgeshire with CamCycle. They want to look at bike routes and cycling activity across the whole of the Cambridgeshire Combined Authority area. They can use social media, they can use the press, they can use their own email lists. We find the most effective way of reaching out to candidates is actually via groups that are already motivated. So you've got, for example, cycling groups, you've got Living Streets who look at pedestrians, you look at school parent groups. There's lots of groups who are already involved in lobbying, maybe for another reason, who would like to participate in this. But the Stockwell is another good example of the other side of that coin, which is you don't necessarily just have to go to those who are, let's say, supporters of your project. The activity in Stockwell was twofold. One was to reach out to people who are campaigning against the low traffic neighborhood, to find out their reasons for it, to give them tools to capture data to validate or not their views, their subjective views of the traffic in the area, and actually dropping off flyers, because you know exactly where you want to go, because it's a very specific area, dropping off flyers and even knocking on doors. So working with residential groups, but he's also saying, this house has a great window, has a great view of this particular street. This is where we want to capture information. Knock, knock. Please, can I put a device in your window? It works. So the citizen science can be everything from national citizen to local neighborhood. So why have we taken this approach? I mean, in terms of our conversations with the users of this data, the number one issue, even before you've captured any data or given out any devices, is that by even having this conversation and offering this device, you are building that conversation with the community, which builds the trust in the whole process right from the beginning. So rather than capturing data, coming up with the project, spending a lot of professional time coming up with considered proposals, and then going to consultation, it's bringing the affected users in as early as possible in the process. Data gathering is required well in advance of any proposals being created. So you're doing benchmarking of data or even establishing the areas. If you know who it's going to affect, you want to bring them as early as possible. That credibility, which even asking the question brings to the project, carries through, we believe, and we've seen in projects, right to the end process. And the one thing that's always asked of me by professionals who are not used to using citizen science is, Their experience of citizen involvement in many cases, particularly with traffic or, shall we say, parking, is that citizens tend to be very negative. So you wait till the consultation process comes along, you present your report, and the loudest voices are your critics. The citizen science approach to this says if you involve people and build that trust early, you're actually creating the ambassador group you need that spreads the word to the community through that trust process, but also creates the louder voices which are likely to participate in the later stages to balance out, let's say, the negative voices. You've created people who will come and support your view. That is one of the big strengths of taking a citizen science approach rather than necessarily just data gathering. Obviously, from a data point of view, by offering a citizen science approach, we also, particularly when we're talking about low cost. So there's many ways to do this, but we designed this project to be as low cost as possible in order to reach as many citizens as possible. So rather than have one expensive device that does a lot of things, you have a very specific device that can be given to as many people as possible in the area, which gives you a much richer data set of locations, a much wider participation by the users themselves. And on top of that data, by involving more people, you're not just getting the data from the device itself, but you're getting the added on benefit, which is the input from the lived experience of what's happening, why things have happened, what to look at, and interpreting that data. And on top of that data, assuming you're more involved in the engagement, there's then the possibility to take that data and use co-creation activities, engagement in terms of, as we saw in the Islington example, don't just gather data on what's wrong, but then ask people what you can do about it to get your recommendations. You'll get a lot more richness by involving these people who now know very much about your project from the beginning. And lastly, just from a purely commercial point of view, taking a low-cost approach to citizen science, it's budget friendly. It's a good solution for people who need data, who want to do engagement and need information. A citizen science approach can almost always deliver a lot of that value for probably a lower amount of money. Not necessarily, depending on how much research you need to do on top of it. But in terms of our view, so for example, you don't need to install things on public lampposts and the high cost of installation. And the community does your outreach for you. They speak to their neighbors. I can't put it in my window because I got a tree in front of it. Please put it in yours. Can you get involved in this process? You already doubled your participation. I won't go into a great deal, but again, I can talk about it. The idea here is that we then gather data which is multimodal for every day, every 15 minutes of the day. And then we offer a lot of that data as open data. So not only do the authorities get the data, but the users themselves have data on their own street, and all their neighbors can then access that through the open data platform, and then use that. I'll come on to it. I realize I'm running a bit slow, so I'll get onto the use cases to show you what that might mean. Here's a great example which we like to point to, which shows the real power of having open data and citizen involvement. Actually, this wasn't even run by any authority. So this was a case where a particular resident on a street wanted to change the street because although it was a 30 kilometer an hour, that's a 20 mile an hour street, cars are going too fast. And you know what it's like. If you lobby your councillor, they'll say, great, we'll look at it, and probably nothing will be able to happen because they haven't prioritized it. So this user put one of our devices on their street to gather that information, but she alone wasn't able to do very much with it. But outreach from another data scientist who lived locally, who also cared about it but didn't have a device, said, well, give me the data and I will analyze it for you. And then they worked together with a community group to lobby the authorities. It's maybe a little bit hard to see, but if you look at that graph in the bottom right there, you'll see that the red line indicates the percentage of traffic that we registered that was going above the speed limit every single day of the year. And you'll see that for about half the year, 50% of the traffic was exceeding the speed limit on that road. So we validated that residents' view of what was going on. That lobbying led to the installation of the sign you'll see just up there, which is the speed sign, which tells the drivers what speed they're going at, but doesn't do any enforcement. By actually tracking that data every day, we can see that actually it had an impact. At exactly what impact? It had a 10% impact. Speeding dropped to 40%, which is a good thing, but still not good enough. The council could have said, well, we've done something and moved away, but by tracking it continuously, we could show that it wasn't enough. And by continuous lobbying, they eventually got a speed bump put in November, and you'll see that speeding dropped to 10%. So it was data generated by citizens, analyzed by citizens to get together to lobby the local authority, which led to a change on a particular street. So you can imagine, were we to scale that up to a neighborhood or a city, you've got an ability to identify the problems, identify the key locations, and measure the impact. Just as an aside, I remember that I think there were about 50 local low traffic neighborhoods implemented in London during lockdown. But the report that came out after the fact a couple of years later by University of Westminster could only look at data for about 40 or 45% of those, because for the other half, more than half, they didn't either have data beforehand to see what the impact was, or didn't measure the impact of the actual neighborhood. So if you're going to make a big investment, you need to be able to track this data and prove it. Otherwise, the loud voices complaining will eventually maybe impact the ability for politicians to see this through. I said I'd come back to this one. Utrecht, as you are probably familiar, is a very strong, smart city itself, with lots of biking. But actually, it's has a very forward-thinking province as well. The wider province of Utrecht. The province has engaged or created and engaged a citizen science organization called Samen met in Utrecht, all together in Utrecht, to do a whole range of citizen science projects and recruit participants from across the whole of the province, doing not just traffic monitoring, but noise, water quality, air quality, all sorts of things, and does this sort of outreach so that people are participating as a whole. That data is obviously valuable to the province for their planning, but they then also make that available to the citizens to then do things with, which is a great example of what open data and citizen science can do with projects like ours. Just as an example, so they have currently something like 150 with a plan to expand to about 300 of our devices spread across the province, and they've done this over a number of years. So the main use is, of course, to take this constant data from all these locations, put it into a traffic model, so that if and when they're planning any changes, they have an idea what that impact is going to be, and they can measure whether it's been positive or not. That's great, and that justifies their investment. All the added benefit is that in the first example there, a data company, I think it was academics, looked at research to view specific issues, and in this case was how many drivers were going down one-way streets in the wrong direction, and why and when. And so they used the Telraam data to do that analysis. Now, this wasn't run by the city, it wasn't planned in advance, but it was something that they could do from that open data. And they detected where and when, and you wouldn't be surprised, it's at rush hour, when it was a shortcut around traffic jams. That's when it was dangerous driving down one-way streets. So they could at least identify those locations, either do enforcement or change the junctions that were causing the traffic jams. There's a great example of the benefits of open data. The other one is one approach I really love, which is that the open data exists. They then make it available to schools. And this was a report done by students from a school comparing the the cyclability of, or how much of a cycling city Utrecht was compared to either other big cities like Brussels. So the students got to analyze the data, and this was a great project. You can find it on the Samen met in Utrecht website. Although it's in Dutch, you'll have to do a Google Translate on it. But it's great to see how citizens of all ages and all backgrounds can take this information and turn it into valuable insights for themselves and learning. Hopefully we're still okay on time. Yeah, I see a nodding. A very good example which comes up a lot is school streets. School streets are obviously becoming more popular, which is great, which is where streets around a school are closed off to vehicle traffic to encourage students to walk and cycle to school safely. It's a great idea, as you can imagine, from a certain perspective. There are people, however, who are negatively affected, which are the residents of the streets around it, who might love the school, but might not like the fact that it's closed off. So rather than just doing it, we worked with the city of Herzele to research 3 particular schools where they used the devices to put, not just to look at the school itself, but to look at the streets surrounding the school where now, since the school street was closed off and the parents who are used to driving to school might, shall we say, displace the traffic onto those streets. So by putting the devices in, not only did they show the positive impact on cycling and walking to school, but the negative impact on those streets, which is what created the opposition. They actually then, from the beginning, built in a process of involving those residents with the devices in a conversation about the planning of these school streets for each school, examined the data afterwards to see the impact, and used that conversation to co-create solutions, including, well, one of the issues was now that cars couldn't go to the school street, they were on the next street along, which was 2 directions, but because it had parking and lots more traffic, was creating a lot of congestion. So by making it one-way street, they had removed a lot of that congestion. Still accessible, but less congestion. And they also looked at parking and where people were parking, and so it was safer for crossing. That participative approach meant, excuse me, it was much more popular overall and more effective. So I was taking a quick drink. We're hoping to see that replicated. We've replicated it in quite a number of places now. This is something, it's an approach which is, let's look at everyone who's involved in the process and give them the tools to capture the data and involvement in a process of conversation about the implications so that we can co-create the solutions out of it and make sure that everyone feels that their voices are being heard, which is the key thing here. Another very quick one. This one's from a grassroots, so rather than city doing it, San Francisco created a number of slow streets during the COVID lockdown. The definition of a slow street is one has a sort of legal requirement, which was the idea they're not actually blocked to traffic, they're still open, but cars are supposed to go slower so that they become a mixed use street. In other words, they were trying to make sure there were fewer than 1,000 cars a day and that their average speed was about 15 miles an hour. And so they made a few adjustments to the street and the access, mainly through signage. So the users of the streets had some Telraam devices which showed that whether this was getting through to the drivers, and it was. They showed, in fact, at one point where signage was changed. They removed some signage in theory to update it with the potential that it might be taken away. The day it was taken away, traffic increased dramatically and speeds increased. So by having ongoing monitoring, without having to need it to plan in advance, but there every day, they could show that it was having an effect, that these signs specifically were having an effect, and they put them back in. The citizens used this to lobby the local authorities. Having done that, and it created a wider network, they then used it to monitor the impact, the current, shall we say, a reality on each of those streets. And you'll see that bottom graph, very colorful lines. Most of those lines are below that central dotted line. That's that 15 mile an hour target. but you'll see that a couple of the streets, although they are still closed streets, slow streets, were constantly exceeding the target 50 miles an hour. So they could target, the users could target the push they were doing in terms of improving the signage and traffic calming to the specific streets that were having issues. That was their ability to monitor it and give feedback. You didn't need the city authorities to be involved from the beginning. You could use this to lobby them. And that's still ongoing, and it's growing still massively in San Francisco, which is great. I think I've more or less got it on time. Look at that. It's almost like I planned it. There's lots more examples. We're working all across the UK. We're working across the world. If you've got questions in your area or other ways of approaching it, I'm happy to answer. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thanks so much, Rob. That's fantastic, and super interesting to see so many different examples in different places. I wondered if anyone had any immediate questions for Rob and wanted to come off mute and ask them directly.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for the presentation. That's really, really interesting. I wondered if the devices have an interface themselves, or the only way of viewing data is on a computer or phone, for example.
Good question. So yes, I think if you saw the photo, the screen has a screen, so the user themselves sees a summary of the key modes. So it shows you the number of pedestrians, the number of cars, the number of two-wheelers, so it's bikes and motorbikes together, and heavy vehicles, and it gives you that information for the whole day and for the last 15 minutes. So that's a constant feedback to the user so they can monitor it. But they also have their own dashboard where if they can log into their computer or their mobile phone, they can see a lot more information, and they can look at different periods and see trends and so on.
That's great, thank you.
I have a question.
I'm ready.
So, no, it's not for you.
Oh, okay.
Would you like to wait? Are we taking questions only on Telraam now?
I think we can take questions. Is it for Esther or is it?
Nice to see you, Esther. I was actually the mentor for Islington, and the project has finished about a year ago, Esther. And it was so nice to hear that there was sequence in the impact beyond the funding and the actual project in the area. So I saw that Islington changed actually some of the ways that it is engaging citizens, and introduced some new processes and some new ways of working, which is wonderful. And it shows the real longer term impact that such initiatives can have. Esther, your presentation was very interesting. Thank you for this. I would like to ask Alexandra, can you please give us some more information about the citizen science component from the project that you mentioned? Because yeah. I understood the framework, the background, and also the results, but the citizen science part was not very clear for me.
Well, I don't know if this is something that you're able to if you know more about. But as far as I understood, it was a group of residents who were kind of most vocal about kind of not, or having negative attitudes towards the low traffic neighborhood in their area. And so they were involved in using the Telraam sensors and in collecting data around the traffic and kind of understanding the process of data collection that was being used by the local authority. And so then the aim through that was to try and kind of raise concerns or like voice concerns, but also understand the kind of monitoring process that was being used.
Yeah, so in terms of the Tranquil City project, yeah, so we handed out the devices for them to gather the data, so they got to see it. Before we did that, we sat all in a room together and looked at a map, and they could put on their map all the issues that they were aware of, which highlighted from their lived experience where the traffic hotspots were going to be, which council may or may not know about. So they had views, for example, which roads were the access to the hospital that were going to cause the problems, where they had trouble crossing roads, etc. So that was a sort of subjective map. Then we did the traffic data gathering, which showed traffic patterns across locations and different days of the week, times of day, and so on. That raw data was compared as much as possible, though we only had a few cameras, locations, and a limited amount of time. But what was also interesting for them is that Tranquil City brought in another layer of analysis where they took the traffic data and using an algorithm could predict air quality issues based on traffic data, which again showed the difference between those who lived on boundary roads with lots of heavy goods compared to those residents who lived on the central roads that were quieter, only with cars, where the air quality was likely to be a lot better. Those insights were very helpful for the residents, which was then used to discuss likely interventions and the benefits of them from the council's perspective. And so even though they didn't always agree, they had a better understanding of the decision-making requirements of the council. And we definitely, by the end, we had two more sessions, I think, or one or two more sessions where we looked at the data. And the final impression was that not only had the group bonded itself, but that the group had a slightly more positive attitude, I think, to the council, they felt was actually listening to their views. That report was then given to the council. I don't know if we followed up beyond that. So it was a combination of data gathering, community engagement building, and trust building, which I think was the result. So yeah, there were several layers to it.
Okay.
Hello, may I make a question, please?
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for the presentations. I'm Mario. I'm from Portugal. I work in municipality, and I would like to ask Robert if if it's possible to get those sensors here in Portugal, and if yes, with whom should we talk to? And what kind of information and data can we get from those sensors? If it's just the velocity, or it might have some counting of the different kinds of vehicles. What is the kind of data that we might gather? And the other thing is, how do they run? If it's battery on batteries, or if it's they have to be connected to electricity on the houses of the volunteers. How does that work? Thank you very much.
Happy to go into it. I don't want to take up too much time of the citizen science to do a sort of Telraam pitch here, but I'll hopefully give you an overview. The answer is yes, they can work in Portugal. We have some devices at the moment in Portugal. You can either do it yourself or lobby your local government, your association, like someone like Islington Council, maybe. Obviously in the UK, you speak to the council, who then looks at the streets as a whole. In terms of what they gather, you'll get I say 10 different modes. So it's pedestrians, bikes, motorbikes, cars, buses, etc. For your street in both directions. It tells you which direction they were going, and for the cars, the speed they were going at. That's the information you would need to say, look, there are too many cars, they're going too fast, there's too many trucks, or look, there's actually 10 times more bikes on this street than you realize, therefore we need safer bike infrastructure, or there's a lot more pedestrians and we need more crossings. We don't do the enforcement, but you would get the data, which then, for whatever reason you want that data, you could then use to work with citizens or with the local authority to do that. Very often, the local authority will actually be interested in the data, but they have limited resources, so they've got to decide where to do it. By giving them actual data, you help them to prioritize. And if you are right that there's a big issue, then as long as they've got the information, then they'll do it. So that's our approach, is to say either bottom up lobby, or they already know the issues, they want to involve citizens to get that data. That's our approach. Just looking at, there's a device in Coimbra, or no, outside of Coimbra, it's on the coast. There's a few in Lisbon. So we are working on getting as far as Portugal. Oh yeah, and just generally, yeah, just what I come from is that you put this device on the inside of your window. It's in your flat, in your house. So this is a citizen-owned project device. So yes, all you need to do is plug it in and stick it on your window. Any more questions, I'm happy to answer, but you can go to telraam.net and see the information. So that's for anyone who's interested in it.
Thank you very much.
There's a question in the chat from Lara, wanting to know a bit more information about the Herzele, like the School Streets project. I may be pronouncing the name wrong.
Herzele, yes, I did see that. I was looking up a quick map of it. If you go to our website, I'm going to put a link in the chat now, because you can do it directly rather than me sharing my screen. Our homepage is a map. And if you go to that map, every colored point on that map is a live data point of open data of that traffic data. So you can go to Herzele and see that there's about half a dozen or more, 8 or so, 9 devices still running in that area. So you can click on it and get the live data and any historical information you're interested in. Someone else, I think, has already shared, Alex did, a link to a case study we've done on a wider project in Heusden Zolder. We're trying to write up some more use cases like this so I can share it with you more specifically. But we launched with a European-wide project called WeCount back in 2019. We did a lot of school streets then, and there's some guidance from that WeCount project, academic guidance came out on how to involve schools. So I can definitely share that via Alex later on.
Thanks. Yeah, that would be great. I've also seen Jane's question about the kind of Stockwell LTN, and
yeah, sorry. I just put the question in, but I thought I should introduce myself. So I do work for Camden Council. I'm working in collaboration with transport colleagues on the Holborn Liverpool neighbourhood. So that's why I'm on the call. But I was just looking at it thinking, that's where I live. So very interested in that, because I didn't know anything about it. So sort of any further information would be really helpful, because it's my neighbourhood. So it's great.
You obviously didn't have a sign in your window that said no to the LTN, which is
I've seen so many of them, seriously. And I keep on looking at it thinking, well, you know, why do people get away with this? So yeah.
Well, that's what we were trying to engage at the time. That's why we knocked on some windows. But as I say, you can actually engage citizens through evidence like that, to targeting groups if you want to. So I'm happy to, if you email me, I can chat a bit more.
Thank you. I will do. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions from anyone?
I just had a follow-up question for Esther, if that's okay.
Of course.
So I asked Esther in the chat about how they achieve such fantastic on-the-ground impact so quickly. And And you mentioned, Esther, that you had good buy-in from different departments in the council from the start. Did they come to that first day's workshop, or were they involved even in the proposal development? What kind of stage did those other departments who could be the ones that actually take the action come in?
So we, great question. We worked on the whole entire project. It was a cross council team. So yeah, we had it was the strategy and engagement team, which is the team I'm in, and a member of the planning team, a member of the transport team, and a member of the inclusive design team, who were kind of, you know, doing the project management and delivery and facilitation and all of that stuff, and coordinating with Access Able. And then it was kind of those the teams of like everybody in that kind of project group who would then kind of go on and take on those recommendations. And yeah, it was kind of from those teams that we managed to like secure the funding, for example, to make those changes following the accessibility audit. They weren't like super immediate. It still took like, you know, a few months to actually confirm the funding and make it happen and stuff. And to be honest, I think we also, in terms of that, I think we also got quite lucky because it was coming at the same time where everyone was trying to like use up budgets and things like that. So actually, in terms of timing, I think we got really, really lucky. And so if it was like 6 months earlier, we might not have been, just being like brutally honest about that. But yeah, I think I think the fact that it was a real kind of cross-council team effort was really important. And yes, we invited some kind of more senior folk, heads of teams, to some of the workshops to meet some of the participants as well. And actually had some of them helping out on the day and stuff. And I think that was just so helpful because, you know, it's not every day that you know, fairly senior folk in councils are kind of one-to-one with residents, and that was like a key thing for us. Does that answer your question?
It does. I think it's fascinating because I think often it's such a struggle. I think it's a really interesting example of a local authority leading a citizen science project as well, which I think is quite unusual. Particularly, I don't know if it's the case in other countries, but in the UK, I think that's quite unusual. And to get that level of buy-in and commitment, whereas I think it's something that maybe a typical local authority might be quite nervous of and a bit resistant to, is that kind of level of allowing residents into that kind of process.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like that's what my team does a lot of, is kind of working with colleagues around the council to try and make these processes easier and make them happen much more kind of business as usual rather than like one-off projects. But yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, you know, it wasn't all smooth sailing. It was at times like, you know, quite fraught, and we did have to do a fair amount of like selling the idea and trying to kind of convince people that it was worth doing and worth people coming along to and worth investing like time, because obviously we had Margarita, so nice to see you on the call, you know, helping out with a lot of the citizen science stuff, but it did take quite a lot of kind of staff time to plan and deliver and follow through and, you know, keep those relationships and build the relationships with residents as well. And yeah, it's really interesting actually. There is a citizen science project which is happening in our kind of neighbourhoods team as well. Not necessarily off the back of this one, but this one has been able to inform that one, and it's all to do with kind of noise pollution. So I was really interested by this Telraam presentation and webinar as well. But yeah, it's been really helpful having this as kind of a pilot citizen science that we can kind of take learnings from and help other teams to deliver their own citizen science projects.
And have you shared that with other local authorities as well?
So interestingly, there was a colleague from Camden on the call. Camden, yes, we met with their kind of equivalents in their kind of equivalent of our team the other week, and shared some of this learning. But to be honest, not past Camden. And yeah, would definitely be up for any kind of skills or learning or lessons learned kind of sharing at any point.
That would be great. Yeah, so I'm in York, and yeah, I wonder if sometimes London's a bit like more progressive and forward thinking with these
Listen,
I don't know.
I don't personally, I don't think necessarily, no.
Okay.
I really don't.
But yeah, we've done loads of stuff on mobility in York, and like mobility scooters, and you know, like York's historical city is not necessarily set up for mobility. So we do quite a lot of research on mobility. So it's really, really interesting to hear about like how you've approached it. Yeah, I might get in touch with you.
Yeah. Please. I'll pop my email in the chat.
I've written it down. Yeah,
perfect.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
There was actually a related point I was going to make, which is that citizen science projects engagement process don't manage themselves. They need to be driven by someone who takes responsibility, and it's great to see someone like Islington Council doing that. To be effective, you need to have the right people involved. What could be beneficial and something to keep in mind is that the examples that we've seen, so the Stockwell example and the Samenmet and Utrecht example, are actually involving a third party, which creates a sort of channel of communication between the citizens and the authorities. The authorities sometimes can be a little bit reticent to open the channels, and if they don't have the skills or the time or the resources to do this, it can get lost. They want the investment, but they don't necessarily have the time for the engagement. So by actually working with third parties like Tranquil City, like Samenmet and Utrecht, you can actually get someone who can manage that data, get it to the right people, and see that something's happening and take responsibility for it, which might be an easier investment than to try and find the resources to create cross-departmental groups within a council, for example. I'd love it if the councils are directly, and a lot of the councils we work with do it directly, but I think maybe the experience is that for larger projects, maybe it is beneficial to have someone who can do that for you, just depending whether you have the resources or not.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. Thanks, Rob. I was also just going to pick up on a couple of things that Rachel and Esther mentioned, but there was also someone from Ealing who was here for most of it, but I think had to leave, Rajiv, but I know they're really interested in learning as well from you. And also your point, Rachel, about kind of it's quite unusual for citizen science projects to be led by a local authority. I think in the second cohort of IMPETUS, of the IMPETUS accelerator, there's quite a few other projects, not in the UK, but in I think in Italy and in Portugal, where it's a kind of partnership. Like the project team is a partnership made up of people from the municipality and others. So it's really, yeah, I'm interested to see how that works. Yeah. I guess I had a question just for Rob, but it was because a lot of, and it kind of relates, but a lot of the projects that you've mentioned, there's kind of different actors, obviously, but is there a kind of, like, who approaches you? Is it anyone and everyone? Is it like lots of different types of organizations and individuals? Are you seeing more from local authorities or more from, I don't know, different community groups or?
It's a good question. It varies a lot by country. I think it's the interest in our terms, it'll be a balance between the interest in citizen science and the interest in mobility. So I would say European wise, in terms of EU, it's a lot more top down. So the EU is offering funds for regions and cities to invest in citizen science projects, to involve citizens in projects. So you'll see a lot of money coming in at the very top. So that comes from councils and councillors who say, we need to do this. We are tasked with, for example, doing a SUMP, a Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. Therefore, we need your data to be able to carry this out. That doesn't happen in the UK. You wouldn't be surprised. We don't have the funding. We don't have the vision yet. So it's actually here. Actually, it's the councils, but it's bottom up. So it's transport planners who say, I've got to do a low traffic neighborhood, or I'm looking at bike planning, active travel, for example, a lot of active travel based research because there's not a lot of data. So they'll say, I need to gather this information. Can you help? And then they have to sell it internally and grow that, which is fine. But it gets small, and therefore they don't always have the budgets to do lots of engagement and activity. So it tends to be quite focused. Whilst in North America, the citizen science stuff and the council stuff doesn't seem to exist. It's very much driven by campaign groups, voluntary stuff. What do they call it? Sort of coming from the charity side. So they will do it because they're interested in, for example, active travel or development of a neighborhood. So it really will vary very much by what kind of information you need and what the nature of the funding and the approach is in that country, particularly when it comes to they're interested in citizen science and citizen outreach.
Thanks. I think, does anyone have any other burning questions they want to ask? Otherwise, we might wrap up. But I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you for taking the time today, but also to Rob and Nesta particularly, and to Chloe and Tranquil City in their absence. I was just going to very quickly just mention next steps, and that this is it's like a series of webinars. So we'll have more. We're trying to do them relatively regularly, so kind of once a month between now and the end of Impetus, which is in June 26. So over the next year and a bit. And also just to flag that there's the next Impetus open call so I think it opens on the 10th of January, Chris, maybe correct me, and it runs until it's open for applications until the 10th of March. So we'll be releasing more information about that soon, but if anyone's got ideas for projects that they want to start, that's an opportunity.
The 7th of January to the 10th of March is
Exactly.
unofficially, officially the dates. They might be subject to slight change, but yeah. I've also sent a link in the chat, although we haven't updated the page with the current information just yet, as we're still working towards that.
Yeah, I'm flagging it well in advance. But yeah, thank you so much, and yeah, thanks for taking lunchtime to stay with us. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you.